four fantastic panelists. Quick introduction for myself, Rob Sarrow, an investor at Full Capital. But I'd really like to kick off by everyone introducing themselves and really understand what they're working on in the permission layer right now. But we'll start with Kendall.
So I just spoke, so everyone probably heard my intro, but I'm Kendall, co-founder of Proximity, and we are working with a lot of your teams on some chain abstraction products.
Hey everyone, my name is Ahmed. I'm one of the co-founders at Biconomy, and at Biconomy we provide a full-stack account abstraction solution for developers. We're currently the biggest infrastructure provider for account abstraction right now in EVM.
Hi, I'm Max Resnick. I'm the head of research at Special Mechanisms Group, which is a division within Consensus that works on MEV research and special projects. As far as the permission layer goes, I work somewhat with Linea and with MetaMask.
I'm Austin Adams. I'm a researcher at Uniswap Labs. I work on protocol design on Uniswap v4 and a lot of our other products. And that's the app layer that we do.
All right, so yeah, to really kick it off, I think blockchains present significant barriers to entry, notably the need for wallet and fees associated with each transaction. So to kind of add a little bit of life at the beginning of the panel, I think we should kind of go through spiciest takes. I would like to start off first. When it comes to transaction fees specifically, I'd like to start off with Max.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I think if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I'm not a big fan of 1559. I guess the framing that we should always think about transaction fees in is it efficient? Do we have the people who want to get on-chain getting on-chain the most? The people who want to get the most get on-chain the most? That should be what happens. And then the other thing, which I think 1559 tried to address, is should users have low regret? Should they be overpaying or underpaying? How do we try to fix that? And I think 1559 took a stab at it, and I'm not super happy with where we got. I think we look at a 1559 price chart, and it has enough fluctuation that if you look at a 1 hour 1559 price chart, it looks very similar to like a 60-year housing price chart. Because the parameter of the update rule in 1559 is too fast. And so you'll have, within the span of 10 blocks, which is like 2 minutes, you'll have prices going from 40 way to 80 way. And if you're a user, facing that, that's pretty hard if you're just the average user. Do I want to use the chain right now? Do I want to wait 2 minutes and see if the price goes down by half? I think we want to have a system where users can just look at the chain and say, okay, the price is around 40 way right now. It's probably going to be around 40 way for the next hour because demand is pretty steady. And that makes the user experience and the user choice of what to do a lot easier.
I think it's a follow-up on that. It's also really hard to do gas estimates. We do a lot of gas estimates for our users. It's extremely hard. We essentially just have to put it at max, and then it causes issues like congestion a lot.
It's 10x harder. It's 10x harder with account abstraction and all of that.
4327 is bad. It's
Can you expand on that? Why it's more difficult on the AA side?
So essentially, all of 437 transactions are happening on L2s at the moment, and so you essentially need to calculate the L2 gas fee, the call date on one as well, and every L2 has just different ways of doing gas, right? And so when you're supporting these new chains and these applications, what essentially happens is you'd have to really just integrate. There's no sort of common way of integrating every new L2. So that's one aspect. And the other aspect is the entry point. So the entry point kind of leaves a buffer when it comes to gas, and so it just becomes a bit harder to estimate. So we are actually coming out with huge improved gas estimations from our side. We're actually going to put out an SDK that's going to be fully open source and any team could use it. That will hopefully kind of say, okay, this is probably how gas estimation should look like. So we'll probably come on that next week.
That's awesome to hear. Now, when it comes to, I guess, to circle back a little bit more on the spicier side of takes, I'd like to hear something from Kendall, as I know you kind of went through the abstraction side of things.
Yeah, I mean, specifically on the fee model, I think my spicy take is that, I think it's actually more at the chain level. I think that the economics of most chains are kind of broken, especially with, saying this about here, but even the fast chains, I think it's it's unclear, especially with the security. I think the cost of securing a chain is going to continue to trend towards zero, especially as we were able to get more efficient with ZK proofs and prove every single state transition. And I think that's actually going to have a pretty important reckoning for most chains in the space. So less about specifically transaction fees, but ultimately that's how many chains are kind of securing themselves, and I think that's going to cause some issues in the future.
And then Austin, from the application side of things, what are the things that you're thinking through, and does that result in anything spicy?
Yeah, so I think last week we had to do a ton of work because our Arbitrum fee calculations were really off. And it's not trivial at all to integrate these new chains. So users always, or chains always come to us and they're like, we want to be on the Uniswap interface. Can you just integrate us? It's really easy. And I'm like, it is not easy. It is the hardest thing to do. And one of the reasons is because transaction fees or gas fees is really hard, and also there's enough difference between chains that it makes it very hard to integrate, especially on the level of flow that comes through the interface.
Do you think this becomes more of a user education problem, or from a developer education problem?
I don't think a user should be expected to calculate their gas. I think it's fundamentally impossible for them to know. I think one of the good parts, I guess, about 1559, if there are good parts about it, is that 95% of our users land on chain within one block because they're willing to pay for the gas. Could they have paid less and got the same opportunity? Probably. But that's what they're indicating, is they want to be on chain as fast as possible. So that's, I guess, good. But yeah, I think maybe a technical thing. I think it's also just the multi-chain world is very new. So we integrated Uniswap v2 on all L2s recently, and I actually did all the deployments for it, and it was really hard. And it's just I had to get an Etherscan code, I had to get gas on every chain, I had to check all the addresses on every chain, I had to go look at their scanner. It's just it is not easy to be a multi-chain developer either. I just think we're not there yet.
And I think it's, obviously we shouldn't expect users to try to estimate their own fees, but I think one of the things to recognize is even for people who are at the scale of Uniswap or us with MetaMask with hundreds of millions of transactions, it's still not trivial to estimate the fees. And we would appreciate if it was easier so that we can give users a better experience.
Just one quick take here is a couple of years ago we actually looked into fixed price transactions in the form of gas, and then we sort of realized this was an entirely new company on its own. So if anyone is building this, I'd love to talk to you because I think if anyone were to offer sort of fixed price transactions, it would be really amazing. It would heavily improve the UX, but it's very, very hard to do.
Yeah, you kind of touched on a point that I wanted to jump into, where it comes from. What are the tools that developers need to put them in the best position to assist the abstraction for users?
I guess one thing I'll say that is a little bit concerning now is that more transactions are moving to private channels. And so there are certain entities within the supply chain that have more information about what the state of the mempool is and what fees you need to get in than others. And if you're not sophisticated and not tied into the supply chain, you just don't see half the order flow. So you don't see half the things that are competing with your users for the spot and block. And I think it would be nice if we could figure out a way that level the playing field so you didn't basically have to run a block builder to have all the information required to estimate transaction fees.
Yeah, I think a lot of the non sort of block builder flow comes from our interface that's still very difficult for us to even know what it will be, and so it just ends up, and it affects users a lot, right? They really want to be in the next block because they're trying to buy something, and we functionally just have to max out their gas. They just always max out their gas fee, and I think that's it's a reveal of preference that users are willing to pay for that inclusion speed, but is it a really Pareto optimal outcome? Being sure they can pay more, but should they? Especially when gas fees are so high.
I guess to go off on a tangent, to answer your question, at least on the 437 side, what we've been seeing is that lots of applications want to enable account abstraction, which is great. I would say, people typically ask me, like, who's your competitor? I say it's actually the EOA inertia, just because of the fact that when it comes to adapt, they want to basically build where the users are and essentially where all this tooling currently exists. And so it's a really interesting, I would say, balancing act to ensure that devs have enough tooling to ensure that they can attract all the users that they actually can. Be it if they're on board via a smart wallet or they're actually on board via an EOA. And so whether it's working with embedded wallets, making integration super simple, or ensuring a new app chain becomes native AA from the get-go as well, are just a few ways of making sure developers have the right things that they need to provide the best experience for them.
Yeah, I think that is one of the big challenges with the kind of account abstraction wallets is that if you're targeting crypto natives, they almost certainly have some form of wallets already. So, if you're a brand new chain, you might have a little bit of an easier time. You have hard enough time getting users anyway, so at least you can put them in a fresh wallet. But if you're in L2 or you're building an EVM ecosystem, then you do have to fight the inertia. I don't think there's a really clean way, or I don't think the experience tends to be better enough to actually motivate these users to migrate.
I think it would just mainly depend on the app experience. So this is why some dApps are we'll just do it. We know what UX is. And you're right. In terms of users, they shouldn't need to know, right? And so it's still it's something where from the dApp level, if it makes sense.
So what do you think those essential elements are if you had to distill it down to three things for the end users?
So just to clarify, what in terms of what do they need exactly?
For the user-centric approach, when it comes to designing for end users, for abstracting away as much of the complexity as possible.
So one thing is definitely sponsored transactions. 99% of our transactions right now are all gasless transactions. And so that's definitely one aspect. The second aspect, I would say, this is emerging, and I really hope to see more of it. It's just that it's still very early. It's the concept of paying gas on any token. So we just supported Trust Wallet with their new account abstraction wallet on the native app. We essentially provide them the ability to pay gas in over 250 tokens across 7 EVM chains. And right now, given all the transactions that are happening, it's very clear what users are paying gas for. The first one is USDT, and the second is the actual Trust Wallet token, because they allow users to pay less gas if you pay the Trust Wallet token. So I would say this is an emerging thing that, for users, if they kind of see that value add, then they would want to do it. And then the third is more so. This depends on the dApp wanting it for the user. We can talk about session keys, but let's say if it's just for the user themselves, I would say this. We still don't have a world where if I'm using MetaMask, and this is I think what you guys are doing, which is great. This consolidated view of I have accounts across. I have this account and it has ETH across these 3 different chains. I'm not able to this new L2. How can I just batch send my 10 ETH across 3 chains and sending one transaction back to this L2? And I think, we still don't have that ability, and it would be really awesome to see that, right? But that is on smart accounts as well. It's what enables that, not the current paradigm. So I'd say those 3 things, at least for the user point of view, would be great.
Does anyone have anything additional to that?
Yeah, I really agree with the first 2 there. I think my third might be just not making the user do more than one transaction to take an action. I think just approvals, when I first got into crypto, that really confused me. I was I signed my approval and it's on chain. Why do I not have to swap in my wallet? So I think we need to get better at one click and kind of bundling all that stuff together so it's seamless and invisible for the end user.
Yeah, we've sort of gotten into one-click swaps in the Uniswap wallet, where we have sort of more control. I think one of the things that's really confusing to users is they're why do I need ETH at all it's very confusing, especially when a user gets sent money and they're just like, why do I need the second token to do something? And so like not having these native ways of like, they don't have to deal with that at all is pretty difficult for them, especially like when it's a user's first time on chain and they might not even like know what's happening. So I think like, yeah, abstracting away gas is very important and having better ways of doing that.
Yeah, I think having to understand that your token might be on like a different L2 or chain or whatever it is that you may know exists is a bit of a complex experience. We're probably going to see that with a lot of like, pay your friends USDC for dinner or something, and pay it to you on like, a new L2, even like ZK Sync or something that we all know pretty well, but maybe they've never heard of it, or even have heard of an L2 and know what that is. You have to explain to them, oh yeah, that's supported on these exchanges, but not on these exchanges. And it just becomes like a frustrating experience.
Austin, you mentioned within the Uniswap app you're getting to the one-click swaps. Do you believe that the interface is where everything lives, and this is what all the users need to worry about, and then it shifts kind of the competition to one layer below all the other services to provide for that one-click action?
Yeah, I think users will naturally go to where it's best for them. I'm sort of a believer that like the user doesn't really care about like 1 or 2 bits. They just sort of want their thing and they want it now. And they want like good average execution. They just want good outcomes. They want their things when they want it. And we should be competing to give them the best prices, best gas, best, like experience. So I think like those things should and have to be abstracted away from the user. It's quite insane that we're like, all right, you have to go to your MetaMask and approve your wallet, but you can't prove too much, and then you gotta go set your slippage tolerance, and then you gotta go do all this stuff. It's just like, do you really expect like your grandmother to do that and then not lose all their money? It's just like not feasible at all. And that's not just for like Uniswap. I think it's just for like every interaction they have on chain.
Yeah, I think the user needs to get what they expect to get almost every time. And right now, they may be getting it 95% of the time if we're good. And a lot of users, like you were saying, Austin, they will sign their transaction and they'll just stare at it and wait. So, maybe we could just lower block times, then they could be waiting slightly less long. But also just making sure that they can get into the next block if they're the type of person that will just sit there and anxiously stare and wait for their $10,000 swap or whatever to go through. Would be pretty nice if we could always make sure that they could get it in the next block and they're not censored because the builder is trying to manipulate the base fee or something.
Speaking of block times, Max, you tweeted earlier today that the perfect chain does not exist. Would love to understand your thinking behind that and have everyone comment that through.
Yeah, I think I was being sarcastic that I think the perfect chain doesn't exist right now, but we know what it would look like. And one of the things there is 200 millisecond block times, and that just goes back to what I was saying, where the user just doesn't want to be sitting there waiting for 12 seconds or 24 seconds if they don't make it into the first block. That's just an anxious and painful experience for the user. So I think 200 millisecond block times would be a great way to do that. Another thing I put in there on my wish list for the perfect chain was a multiple proposer architecture, where in case one of the proposers doesn't want to include you, it can be included by somebody else. That just contributes more to that seamless, I did the actions I was supposed to do, I expected to get my swap in, and now it's in.
Does anyone else have anything to add to their perfect chain? Any disagreements?
No, I think maybe 200 milliseconds, maybe get it down lower, maybe get it down higher. But yeah, I think the sort of number doesn't super matter. I just think it's 12 seconds is kind of a lot. I do a lot of my stuff in the EVM ecosystem, on L2s now. And it's kind of nice to be you refresh, you do your transaction and you open, Argus scan or Optimism scan, and it's just done. You're it's done. I'm happy. I don't have to just wait there and just click it until it, indexes or something, or if it gets mined. So it's quite nice to just open up Argus scan and have it done. So I think it's important to lower block times. Not amazing.
And I think it's not just do I get in the next block, it's also when does the probabilistic finality that's enough for the exchange to credit my balance exist. And that's one of the, like, if you ever like move money to Coinbase or something like that, it's really painful just to wait for the whatever it is, 35 blocks or something that they take.
Lower on base though, you know.
Is it lower on base? Yeah, because they have lower block times, of course.
Well, I think also they control.
They also control base, so they didn't trust it.
That was the thing I noticed. I moved money to Coinbase from Arbitrum, and it took a lot longer than it did on Base. Is that a technical reason? I don't know, but it was a much nicer user experience to have it fast.
Any other comments on that, or?
I mean, this is just like a personal anecdote. I was in London, my wife was in Dubai. I had to do a payment, you know, and I was like, all right, let's just go and Google me, share your screen, just go through MetaMask. I need you to swap some things. It took her 20 minutes to swap one token to USDC and then actually send that. And then I said, okay, this is why, you know, we exist as a company, because, you know, fundamentally, you know, why is it taking, you know, my wife who doesn't know much about crypto and me just helping her along that journey around 15, 20 minutes to do that. And so, yeah, it just, I mean, just to throw off, you know, just to add up to what they were saying.
One thing I'll add to the exchange example you guys are giving is that, well, even these really fast and cheap L2s or chains, there tends to be like a fixed sort of withdrawal fee of like $1 plus, which, you know, for a lot of people maybe isn't a big deal, but for a good segment of the people who are trying on board, actually can make a pretty big difference. If you're trying to withdraw like $5, $10, $1 is a lot. And I guess what's interesting is like, the gas fees are not necessarily, I mean, if you're using Arbitrum or something like that, maybe, but I think we actually really need to get that. That's where gas fees actually become like a really big difference maker. It's like that fee needs to be as close to zero as possible if we want people to use this for a broad amount of like the actual real world payment use cases that exist outside the West.
Speaking of use cases, what are the use cases that people are excited about when it comes to this chain abstraction going forward?
I think it'd be kind of nice to have swaps done on one chain and then have like settlement done on mainnet, for example. I think like it would be very nice if we could abstract away from users and dApps that they're on different chains, and then they can sort of just like trade where it's the best prices, because we see this in practice where, like, you know, Arbitrum has better Arbitrum liquidity, Optimism has better Optimism liquidity, and like a lot of users actually come to mainnet and they're like, why is this Optimism liquidity bad? And I'm like, well, like, that's how it is, and they don't really like that. So it'd be kind of nice if like you could do trades on one chain and then have them settle sort of just appear in your wallet without actually having to deal with all the complexities behind bridging and the costs as well.
I think I'm most excited about gas sponsorship and paying gas and other tokens. Actually, one of the things we notice in the user flows is that there's quite a few users who will queue up a swap, and then will go and they will see that they just like don't have enough gas, or slightly don't have enough gas, and then they will cancel their swap. And I think obviously if they're queuing up a swap, they're probably pretty interested in doing it. So removing that friction, you can see, you know, that's a very tangible segment of the population that wants to swap, and if they could just, you know, pay their gas fee with a different token or have it sponsored for them, they would be much happier.
Yeah, I think there's so many things to be excited about. You guys already said quite a few things. One thing I would say is there was one really cool integration which we did via modules using Chain Abstraction, which enabled a perp aggregator to allow their users to sign a trade on Arbitrum, but the actual trade, well, sign the transaction on Arbitrum, but the actual trade is happening on Optimism. And so this is essentially allowing users to do transactions on different chains regardless of where they are. And I think we're still yet to see like the best sort of UI and design for this. And it'll be really cool to see sort of how this could look like in the future.
Yeah, I'm excited to give developers the opportunity to not necessarily lock themselves into a given ecosystem. Like maybe they can still, you know, be a part of the Ethereum ecosystem and be in an L2, but they don't necessarily have to pick a specific L2. Like there's just, like we're gonna enable ways for them to kind of sit a bit above that. And I think that's kind of one of the harrowing choices you have to make as a developer, is like which chain or L2 or whatever it is do we kind of focus on. And there's a benefit to doing that, but there are also some serious drawbacks. And like that's not necessarily really a core part of what most of, or at least a lot of these devs are trying to build. Like they're trying to build for just end users.
And then throughout the permission layer, like where do you see most different innovations, new use cases, like the value actually flow to and can be captured? Like what entity ends up being the successful one out of all this?
I'll tell you what I hope it isn't, which is the validator and the proposer who just basically runs a piece of software and for some reason right now is getting a huge cut of the revenue by running this PBS auction that doesn't really take that much to run. I really hope that we are able to build systems that can keep the validator from getting a huge cut of the pie and distribute it to users and to the people who are making the user experience actually good. I think validators are important. I think they deserve revenue, and I think they get revenue from the protocol. I don't think they need a huge additional boost of revenue from MEV that comes about due to chain abstraction or whatever we do.
Yeah, I think it's also like really, really hard today to build systems that don't have validators come first. We think like a lot about how to build systems that are good for like our users, like be it swappers, be it LPs, and it's just extremely hard because this like first look and last look that like validators and block builders have. I think like Hayden posted a tweet recently, like $2 billion has been given to ETH validators from the Uniswap protocol, and like a lot less of that has flown to LPs and flown to the protocol, like the DAO itself.
I generally think, of course, those who own the users or the front end will ultimately create the most value, and which goes part and part with, you know, convenience fees are, I think, going to be the norm as well for users. Like, you know, how we are seeing users not just paying the swap fee of MetaMask, but essentially just wanting to pay higher gas price, right, to get the swap executed. So I think if we're able to provide just better UX, then people will pay for convenience.
Yeah, pretty much echo all of that. I think the closer to the user you are, the better positioned you are. I think MetaMask has been a very good example of that.
Well, and Uniswap as well, obviously, but I think that is, you know, it may sound like, hey, that's not going to users, but I think the closer the incentives are to the user, the more the user is going to get out of it, and the more, I mean, you're going to see a bunch of places that see there's a lot of value from providing a good experience to the user, and then they're going to go provide a good user experience, and I think that's exactly what we want. The further away that experience, the further away that value flow is from the user, and the less it requires you to provide a good experience, the less incentive there is to do it. And I also think, like, if you look at credit card points, right? You look at Chase, every year, their margin on their credit card rewards program is squeezed even tighter because everybody else realizes, hey, there's a lot of value from providing a good credit card program that has good features and good rewards, and they have to spend more and more to keep that up. And I hope for the users that that's what's going to happen in the end here as well.
Yeah, it's quite hard to sort of like, of like all the Uniswap transactions, like very little of that flows to the entities who sort of have like built the protocol and things like that. And so it's very difficult, like we can cut down a part of the fees going to certain users or certain like subsets of like validators and things like that, and then cut down costs from everybody by just providing a little bit of that, what was going to validators to others. It's very difficult to sort of like, the economics of like making money as a protocol or a DAO or like a, you know, entity in the space is very difficult at this moment, just because like a lot of the value is weirdly flowing.
Now, to wrap it up, one last thing I want to ask is like, what would you want to see from a UX perspective change? Like, not in the near term, but 5 years out, and like, how feasible is this prediction area?
I just want to know, I would really like a better way to do like gas estimates on L2s, and like, I think like Foundry has actually just may have fixed this today, and they just fixed their gas profiler. So I may be wrong right now, but it's, we were doing like gas golfing for L2 contracts. It was just like possible to figure out like, how much we were actually saving our users because of what the cost of posting and mainnet is not included. But I actually may be wrong now. I think maybe Foundry fixed that today.
Georgios is always one step ahead.
Oh.
I guess my biggest request is, can we get some shorter block times? Whether it's on mainnet or on the L1s or whatever, I just think users need to be more quickly interacting with the chain and have more feedback. And I think that will make their experience so much better.
I would love to see us using, at least myself, to be using crypto more by mobile. I'm using it a bit, but it's like, maybe 15% of my crypto activity. I'd love to see like it being more than 18, 90%. And so I don't think we have the apps for that yet, nor the relevant tooling. And so I'd love to see us get to that point.
I would like to be able to go between chains and not acquire the gas tokens. So however we can make that happen.
I must.
Well, thank you again, everyone, and a big thanks to the panelists.